Hi folks, Mike here, and this is going to be the first in a series of videos explaining the meta-ethics section of the AQA A-Level philosophy syllabus. Whether you're one of my students or you've never seen me before in your life, this video is intended to help you understand meta-ethics in a little bit more detail and help with any homework tasks or independent learning tasks that you may have been set during this lockdown period. With that in mind, let's get started. So what are we actually going to cover in this video? Well, first we're going to look at what meta-ethics actually is and where it fits in with some of the other ethical discussions and other ethical topics that we've been looking at this year. Once we've done that, we're going to look at four key concepts in meta-ethics: cognitivism and non-cognitivism, realism and anti-realism. These terms are going to turn up constantly throughout the rest of this topic, so it's absolutely crucial that you understand them as they play a major role in understanding some of the theories that we're going to be looking at later on. So to understand where meta-ethics fits into the wider ethics topic, it's worth recapping some of the other things that we've looked at this year. And in doing so, we can perhaps see that ethics as a whole can be broken down into three separate tiers. On the base level, we have something called applied ethics. Now, this is something that we've recently looked at A-level, but it's something that if you did RS at GCSE, you will have discussed a lot. It's a discussion about what we should do in specific situation. Applied ethics is all about figuring out what we should do in situations like abortion or euthanasia or the environment or war, and using different religious theories or different ethical theories or different philosophical standpoints to figure out what we should do in those individual situations. Now, this is the type of ethics that most people do. This is the type of ethics that people do in their day-to-day lives every single day. They encounter a situation and they ask themselves, what should I do here? On a second level, we have normative ethics or ethical theory, and this makes up the bulk of what we've been studying this year. This is examining how we might decide what the right or wrong thing to do in any situation is. It's looking at different ethical theories and discussing strengths and weaknesses of each of them and trying to figure out how we should live and how we should decide what to do in any situation. Unlike applied ethics that looks at very specific situations, we could say that normative ethics perhaps zooms out a little bit and asks the question, well, how should we figure out what the right thing to do in general is rather than any given situation? And if that's the case, then we can say that meta-ethics perhaps zooms out again and asks the question, well, what do we actually mean by right and wrong to start with? Never mind what's the right thing to do in any situation. What does it mean to use the term right at all? What does it mean when we call a particular action or person or situation good or bad or right or wrong? How are we using these terms in language, and are there any problems with the way that we use them? Essentially then, we're going to be asking what morality actually is. Is it something that exists mind independently, just simply a property of reality, in the same way that we might say colours are a property of reality, or a particular sound or a particular taste is? Or is it something that is created by us, perhaps by society or by a religion, or even something personal on a psychological level? We're going to discuss some of these questions as we go through the meta-ethics topic, but to effectively do so, we need to understand some key terms first, and that's what we're going to be moving on to next. So to begin to get our head around some of these key terms that we need to look at, we can start by asking what the origin is of certain statements that I'm going to throw out to you. We can ask things like, what's the origin of the idea that light from the sun takes 8 minutes to get to the earth? Or that a sunrise is beautiful, or that if you drop an object it will fall to the floor, that Romeo and Juliet by Shakespeare is a terrible, terrible book, that metal music is boring noise, or that the earth is a globe. Now, some of these you might have already said straight away are facts about reality. Things like the time it takes light from the sun to reach the earth is not something that's based on opinion or feeling. It is something about reality. It's something that just is the case. On the other hand, things like a sunrise being beautiful, or that Romeo and Juliet is a terrible book, or even that metal music is just noise, they are all personal opinions. Now, why is this important? Well, this leads us to a distinction that we have seen before. Some statements, like the time it takes the sun's light to get to the earth, or if we drop an object it will fall to the floor, are based, as I've just said, on facts about reality. We can trace their origin or our belief back to either an observation or an experiment that revealed the way that reality actually is. So we can say that these types of statements are associated with a position called realism. The idea that whatever we're referring to is objective and exists mind independently. On the other hand, Some statements, like a sunrise being beautiful, or that metal music is boring noise, are based on our own opinions or tastes. And whilst they might have come from friends or family or even just society, they don't necessarily reflect the way that reality actually is. There's nothing factual about the idea that metal music is boring noise. It's just an opinion that some people hold. There's nothing factual about a sunrise being beautiful. The sunrise doesn't have a quality of beauty. It is something that we tend to attribute to it. So these types of statements, because they are not based on the way reality actually is, they're associated with anti-realism, the idea that whatever we're referring to is actually mind-dependent, and it doesn't necessarily reflect external facts. Now, as I said at the start of this, we've come across these two terms before. Back at the start of epistemology, we covered direct and indirect realism, both theories that state that what we are perceiving in some way relates to a mind-independent reality. And we also covered idealism, the view that what we are perceiving actually isn't reality, it's just a creation of a mind, and that nothing exists mind independently. So idealism is actually a form of anti-realism at its core. So in metaethics then, the main question we've got to ask using these terms is, are moral beliefs more like this first group of statements? Are they realist? Or are they more like the second group of beliefs? Are they anti-realist? Sorry. Do they express or refer to facts about reality, or are they just based on opinions and attitudes? So this actually leads us to the first two key terms that we need to be aware of to understand the metaethics topic. The first, moral realism, is the view that moral terms or moral statements refer to something objectively real in the world, that things like good and bad or right or wrong exist mind independently in some form, that they are a fact about reality in the same way, as I said before, that somebody might state a particular colour is a fact about reality or a fact about the way the world is. The opposite view is that of moral anti-realism, and this is the claim or the view that moral terms do not refer to real objective things in the world, but to something else entirely, that things like good and bad or right and wrong are actually mind dependent, that they are our creation or something that we have come up with either individually or as a society. Now there are some problems with each of these views that we need to consider on a very basic level at this point. If we take the moral realism view and we say that morals exist mind independently, well, we can ask the question, what actually are they? They're certainly not something that we can observe as easily as we might observe a particular colour or another fact about the way the world is. So what are they? How do we access them? Are they something we can measure in the same way we can measure other facts about reality? On the other hand, if we take a moral anti-realist view, then we have to answer questions like, well, what actually is morality if it doesn't express facts about reality? And why do we talk as if morality does express facts about reality? And what are the implications if it doesn't? What does it mean for moral statements and moral beliefs if we are not talking about them as if they are factual? Now, as I said at the start, there are four key terms that you need to understand to get your head around the metaethics topic. The first two, realist and anti-realist, we've just covered, and you should be relatively aware of anyway, given our work on epistemology previously. The second two, though, cognitive and non-cognitive, are new, and we're going to look at those in a little bit more detail next. But to try and understand them, let's look at some terms, or let's look at some phrases that might fall under each type to start with. So cognitivist language might be things like, this table is red, or my name is Daniel, or I feel hot, or even something like 2 + 2 = 4. On the other hand, non-cognitivist language might be things like shut the door, or you should like strawberry ice cream. Any ideas what the difference between the two might be? Feel free to pause the video here and have a look at these phrases a little bit more closely and see if you can spot what the difference between cognitivism and non-cognitivism is actually going to be. So any ideas what the difference is? Well, let's have a look. So cognitivists in ethics argue that moral judgments are propositions. Now, proposition in philosophy has a very specific meaning. It means a statement that is truth apt. In other words, a statement that can be considered to be true or false, or is used in a way that involves some element of truth or falsity. So if I said, for example, this pencil is red, then that is a cognitivist statement because I am using it in a way that implies that there is some truth or falsity to what I am saying. In this case, it's true, the pencil is actually red. On the other hand, non-cognitivists argue that ethical judgments or ethical sentences do not express propositions, so they are not truth apt. They're not something that we can consider to be true or false. Instead, they do something else. Now, what that something else is part of what we're going to be discussing when we look at non-cognitivism in a little bit more detail. But suffice to say, for the moment, the difference between the two sides is whether or not you believe a moral judgment expresses something that is true or false, or whether you think it does something else with language. So to reiterate this with an example, when we say stealing is wrong, we are offering a proposition if moral cognitivism is correct. We are saying that the phrase stealing is wrong is either going to be true or false for some reason. Now, it doesn't actually matter whether it is actually true or false. That's open for debate, and that's something that is the realm of normative ethics or applied ethics, something that we've looked at previously. It's just the fact that it can be true or false, or it can be shown to be true or false in some way. The main task for cognitivists then is to show how ethical statements can be considered to be true or false. What do they actually refer to? For moral non-cognitivists, on the other hand, statements like stealing is wrong do not express propositions. They are not things that can be considered to be true or false in some way. Instead, they might express an emotion. It might just be the same as me going, boo stealing. Or they might express a prescription to behave in a certain way. It might be a way of me convincing people to behave in a certain way. But crucially, neither of those things, emotive attitudes or prescriptions to behave, can be considered to be true or false. They are, in fact, something else. They might be down to our opinions or feelings. The main tasks for moral non-cognitivists, then, is to explain, well, what the hell ethical language is actually talking about if it's not expressing truth-apt propositions, if it's not expressing something that can be considered to be true or false. Where does this leave us? Well, we've seen four key terms that can be broken up into two pairs. On one hand, we have realism and anti-realism, and they are both concerned with what our language and what our statements are actually referring to. Are we talking about some particular mind-independent fact about reality, or are we talking about something else entirely? We've then also got cognitivism and non-cognitivism. Now, they're both concerned with how we actually use language. Are we talking in a way that is meant to be true or false, or are we expressing something else? Are we expressing something that can't be considered to be true or false? So realism and anti-realism are both about what our language refers to. Cognitivism and non-cognitivism are both concerned with how we use language. Are we talking in a way that is true or false or not? So to go a step further, we can actually draw some connections between these two pairs. On one hand, we can talk about anti-realism and non-cognitivism because they're nearly always linked. Anti-realists deny that ethical language refers to something mind-independent in the world. And following from that, they also want to deny that ethical sentences or ethical language can be considered to be true or false because it doesn't refer to any facts about the world that would make it true or false. So they would also be non-cognitivist by extension. There also tends to be a link between moral realism and cognitivism. A moral realist believes that there are moral facts about reality, and because there are these facts about reality, ethical statements can refer to these facts, and therefore at least some of these statements are going to be true or false, so they would be cognitive. Now, it's worth noting that whilst most of the theories that we're going to look at in the meta-ethics topic are going to fit into one of those two bandings, they're either going to be anti-realist and non-cognitivist, or they're going to be realist and cognitivist. There are some exceptions to this. There are other pairings we could go for. Now, one of these other possible options, namely a realist non-cognitive position, is kind of unlikely because it would require us to say that there are moral facts about reality, but moral statements that we make are not true or false in some way, and that just seems a little bit weird. But an anti-realist cognitive approach to morality is possible, and we are in fact going to look at a theory that takes that view later on in this topic, namely error theory. And that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Hopefully now you've got a little bit of an idea of what we mean by meta-ethics, and you might understand some of the key terms that we're going to use throughout this topic, namely cognitivism and non-cognitivism, and realism and anti-realism. If you found this video useful or you enjoyed it, please feel free to hit like, subscribe and turn on notifications, as I'm going to be uploading a lot more videos in the coming weeks explaining more about meta-ethics and some of the other philosophical topics from the AQA A-level spec. If you've got any questions, drop me a comment below and I'll do the best I can to answer them. I can't guarantee I'll always be able to, but I'll certainly try. And if you think this might be useful to anybody else, please feel free to share it. Thanks, have a good one, see you soon.